888-533-7111 now.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time for our Cannabis Q&A segment with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. We're trying to reach him on the phone right now, so give us just a moment. We'll try to connect. We'll see if Dr. Mitch is there. Dr. Mitch, can you hear us?
Indeed, I can.
Oh, fantastic. Glad to have you here. And, folks, we are live here with Dr. Mitch Earlywine at the 3 o'clock Pacific hour, and the phone number is up on the screen, 971-533-7111, if you'd like to call in with a live question on cannabis science. And that's what we're here for, talking about the science and the study, the history, the health, all about cannabis, and nobody better than Dr. Mitch to tell us all about that. We like to begin by giving Dr. Mitch the first word on any new studies or science we need to know about in the world of cannabis. Dr. Mitch?
As it turns out this week it was pretty slim. Nothing's actually out that I can talk about.
Oh, no new news. All right, I'll have to go to my list here because I keep track of some stories that I wanted to get your opinion on. And this one came from the American Academy of Family Physicians. And before we get into it, can you tell us about that group? I mean, they're not the AMA, right? That's the American Medical Association. How do they relate?
No, so this is just a subset of physicians who are focused on family medicine. Some of them are actually board certified in family medicine. Some of them are just regular MDs who want to be affiliated with that group.
So family medicine just means, your general, going to the doctor for just regular stuff, right?
But they're usually on top of both stuff that you would normally see in pediatrics as well as common issues for adults.
Okay, so from this American Academy of Family Physicians, they have a reference committee and a Congress of Delegates. They meet and they put out positions, and this is their latest position that, according to this report from AAFP themselves, it says delegates chose to refer a resolution opposing legislative approval of smoked medical marijuana, but did adopt a substitute resolution supporting research into the potential therapeutic benefits of marijuana and expressing concern regarding the efficacy of smoked or burned marijuana as a therapeutic modality. And this seems to be, the cover your ass variety of trying to say something good about marijuana, and they keep demonizing the smoked marijuana part. What's your take on this statement from the AAFP?
I think cover your ass may be the best way to describe it. As they point out, no other substances are smoked in a medical way. So despite the ubiquity of the vaporizer now, everyone seems to be pretending like they don't understand it or they don't know it exists or something like that. And we know that, lighting something on fire and inhaling it just doesn't sound like a medical form of administration in the things that we're used to. So I understand their concern about that. However, as we've seen time and again, papers from my lab and others show that the vaporizer is a fine way to sidestep concerns if you're worried about that, and that actually a lot of the lung-related problems that folks were worried about with smoked cannabis are just inappropriate generalizations from the tobacco literature, and because THC is not the tumor-enhancing substance that nicotine is really kind of misplaced.
Yeah, according to this report, they says the committee heard testimony about the lack of empirical evidence on the efficacy of smoking marijuana. How much longer do we need to have medical marijuana? How many more states do we have to have before they can see with their own damn eyes some evidence that smoked marijuana is helping people?
Well, and this is this ridiculous catch-22. So the folks in the states where there actually is medical marijuana are doing the best they can to try to get some of these data out. But the journals have been reluctant to publish things. I've had some PTSD data I've been sitting on for over a year now, and they nitpick me. It's been rejected from 2 different journals, and I feel like we're fighting the good fight here, but the world is getting closer, but just isn't quite close enough to make this statement. In truth, the positive aspects of this thing from that group of physicians is actually a big step forward for this crew, because this is a crew that in the past has said, oh no, marijuana is evil.
Mm-hmm. They also, in their statement, they say, FDA doesn't recognize it. It's a Schedule I substance. It's, it's like you say, it's that catch-22 of there's no evidence because we won't let you find it.
Exactly. And now that particularly Colorado and Washington have bigger chances to get at some of these things, I'm hoping these data will come in, but man, it really is an uphill battle.
Okay. And the other part of this, and by the way, we're also taking, in addition to call-in questions, you can get questions in our chat room on Ustream. If you're there, just go to ustream.tv/radicalruss and click on the chat room. Easy to log in. Just type /login and you can create an account. Absolutely free. In this AAFP reference committee, they also went over, and this has nothing to do with weed, but it's a subject that kind of fascinates me, energy drinks. They adopted a resolution on the FDA to define stimulant drinks, to oppose the availability of free or discounted versions of stimulant products to individuals younger than 18, and to advocate for a whole ban on stimulant drinks for individuals younger than 18. And they're talking about the Rockstar, Monster, Red Bull. And is this alarmist thinking from the AAFP? Is there really something to this?
It's funny because this literature really took off, and there's actually a lot of federal funding on this topic, more than you would guess for given how it really is. And what we find is, weight-based doses of caffeine are actually potentially problematic. So the issue, of course, is still the same for coffee and for caffeinated sodas and things like that, but those are just in some ways harder to ingest at the quantities that are appropriate. I'm apprehensive about this under 18 ban, though, because it creates this wild underground market where basically, 18-year-olds will be getting their 17-year-old friends to do various things for them in order to purchase energy drinks, and I don't like that. I would much prefer just spreading the word that, hey, these have a weird impact on heart rate and have a much higher dose than a lot of the caffeinated things people are used to, and then just have people make educated choices about their consumption accordingly. The other issue is this combination of energy drinks and alcohol. So I've been to bars where Red Bull and vodka is on the list just like anything else. And it's unfortunate because this tends to make people wide-awake drunks. They think they're not intoxicated when they are, and it's rather unfortunate for its impact on both poor sexual decisions and bad driving decisions.
Yeah, that's just what we want, is really alert, focused, energetic drunks.
Exactly.
I like well, I don't like it, but I'm amused by the idea of the ban on stimulant drinks. Psst, hey kid, man, I got some Red Bull, man. You want some Red Bull? I got some Red Bull, man. I got some Monster. Come on, you ain't tried nothing like this, man. Oh my God, what prohibition will do to people. All right, let's get to our chat room questions. John Thomas has a great question here. Are there any studies showing the benefits of topical cannabis for the skin?
So we've got literally tons of anecdotal evidence on this and some interesting stuff going way back to like the 50s, and then wild things from, ancient, what is now China and stuff like that. But we don't actually have randomized clinical trials where folks are putting things on their skin and then having sort of a comparable placebo substance and making all that stuff happen. I'm intrigued by the idea. I was really skeptical about transdermal absorption until a nice massage I got at one of the normal conferences. And I think this is clearly possible, but we just don't have the data to really address it yet.
Okay. We had a story that we talked briefly about last week as well that I just wanted to go more into, this no detectable association between frequency of marijuana use and healthcare usage. And this was just fascinating to me because one of the things Kevin Sabet and the rehabilitationists like to say is that, we legalize marijuana, more people use it, that will result in increased costs, and they imply part of that would be healthcare costs. This study seems to debunk that, wouldn't you say?
In fact, it's pretty compelling, and even the worst of the worst studies prior to that, in the early 90s, you'd see large data sets from like Kaiser Permanente or some of these big HMOs, and it would be respiratory symptoms in people who don't smoke marijuana would be 36% versus 39% in folks who smoke every day or something like that. I mean, they were really doing all they could to cast this in the worst light possible, and often focusing on really specific problems, but it just isn't panning out. And in fact, I like to point out how many people would be in the hospital markedly more often if it weren't for marijuana. And of course, those data never seem to show up in anybody's studies.
Lively Lieber brings up a good question. I've been writing articles now for High Times Online. I've got a daily article just about appearing. And one of them I wrote that generated a huge amount of discussion was called The Top 5 Pro-Pot Myths That Must Be Busted. And my number 3 myth was cannabis cures cancer. And my perspective on it was cancer and cure are really broad and big words, and we can't quite say that yet. Lieber wanted to know what your thought was on that discussion and that concept.
I fall on your side with this, but there are some compelling data suggesting that THC and other cannabinoids can reduce the size of tumors in certain settings. We don't have the randomized clinical trials, in part because of the problems we mentioned earlier, that we just haven't had the chance to do it. And cancer treatment is a complicated and outrageously large field. So if we could just focus on, colon cancer, if we could just focus on skin cancer, if we could just focus on one of these things, that would be a great way to start. And I feel like the preclinical data, the data we have with animals, the data we have with, cancer cells in petri dishes is really compelling. It's time to give this a chance. It's just, it hasn't been done yet.
What about the definition of the word cure? In medical science, what do we consider something that is a cure versus something that is a treatment?
Well, it's intriguing because it doesn't mean necessarily has to go to zero symptoms. But for cancer, we usually look for folks who've had 5 years without any remission, without any return of symptoms, without any new tumors, without any tumors appearing in some other area, something like that. And 5 years clean, basically your risk for cancer drops to what it is for folks who've never had cancer before. And I feel like that would be a superb measure. But that's a pretty demanding criterion to just see if can you shrink tumors with this kind of thing. And that would be certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and of course, I think a numerous amount of healing treatments are available through the promise of cannabinoids, and I think a lot of people misunderstood that part of the article. I was just trying to say, let's not overstate the case at this point.
I feel like that's the safest argument right now, particularly as some folks are just understanding that medical cannabis can even assist in cancer treatment by decreasing nausea and vomiting and improving responses to chemotherapy and things like that. So let's get that part across first before we get onto the more speculative stuff.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Mitch, for talking to us today and every Monday here in our Cannabis Q&A. Folks, if you want to get a question directly to Dr. Mitch, you can use our contact form at 420radio.org/contact or email 420research@gmail.com. Thanks, Dr. Mitch. Talk to you next week.
Take care.
All right. When we come back, time for a radical rant. Stick around.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What makes something funny? How does humor impact health and psychological well-being? How can you incorporate humor into everyday life? A concise, reader-friendly introduction to an important but often underappreciated topic in modern psychology, Humor 101 explains the role of comedy, jokes, and wit in the sciences and discusses why they are so important to understand.